I think many consumers don't realize that this is coming. It will definitely create more headaches for the everyday consumer and how they log in and use search services.
From the newsroom at news.com.au.
Well, if you've ever watched porn online, and let's be honest, most of us have, a big change is going to take place very soon. Here to tell us more is Professor Lisa Given from RMIT. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
This change is going to come into effect in Australia in December. I've got a three-pronged question for you. What exactly is this change? Who's behind it? And why do those in power think we need it?
Okay, I'll try to cover all three bases. The short of this is that the major change, which is people are going to have to verify their age or assure their age when they log into accounts on search engines, search services online. This is very new, and it's not something that's happening around other parts of the world. So what is happening here is the Australian government is trying to say, look, in certain areas where there's potential for high impact around violence, online pornography being a couple of examples, we need to do our best to protect children. And their solution for this is to have everyone effectively assure their age when they sign in so that certain content will simply be filtered out if you're under the age of 18.
Right, so in short, if you want to look at porn, you have to prove that you're 18 or older.
Correct.
Okay. Are we just talking about the obvious sites like Pornhub here, which I hear is very popular, or could this spill over into other mainstream platforms like X, formerly known as Twitter, and Reddit as well?
It could apply to absolutely anything. And I think that's what's quite unique about it is that rather than say when you or someone you know goes onto Pornhub, rather than going onto that specific service and having them check your age, this is actually being done at the search engine account level. That means anything that you search when you type, words into Google that could be related to online pornography are going to be excluded if you're under 18. So you won't even know what's missing if you're under 18. Because that's all going to happen kind of in behind the system if the system understands that you are not of that age.
But if I go to Pornhub.com, then it's Pornhub's responsibility to verify my age. Is that right?
It's not a restriction at the level of an individual company's service in this way. It's actually more broad. So in the UK, for example, they've implemented age restrictions that would affect a company like Pornhub. Now, Pornhub might introduce that anyway. You might have to check your age when going on a certain service. But what this government has brought in is something that happens at the search engine login level. So that means if you don't log in to Google, right? If you don't use your Google account and you kind of surf the web without any kind of login, you'll still find your way to Pornhub. And then the question is, are there going to be restrictions on that particular site?
Okay, well, these sites like Google then, what happens if they fail to enforce these new rules when they come into effect?
Yeah, it's a critical question. I mean, the government, in many cases, we've seen it with social media banning as well, is planning to introduce major fees, major, disciplines to these companies. And we're talking sometimes they're saying in the millions and multi-millions of dollars for non-compliance. The challenge, of course, is that you don't need an account to search online. So from the company's perspective, what they have to do is demonstrate that they are taking those reasonable steps to verify people's ages, check that they are age assured, that they can, demonstrate that people with an account are over the age of 18. And if people are then searching online for other content under 18, there are specific measures they also have to take around, for example, blurring the little images, the thumbnail images that you might see online, so that it's intended to reduce the potential harm for kids if they stumble upon an image that's pornographic.
How exactly will these sites verify that someone is over 18?
Mm. It's a great question. We're not sure yet exactly what the services are going to choose to do. We know that just ticking a box saying, are you over the age of 18? Yes or no is not going to be sufficient. They're going to have to do something either using technology like facial scanning to estimate your age. They could ask for ID. They could also just look at the content they already know about you. If you already have an account and you've had it for 20 years, then they would know that you're obviously over the age of 18. That could be enough to satisfy what they need to do.
Will this actually work though? Because, someone could go on their computer with a Google account, right, and be an adult, but it's not like you log out of your Google account every time you leave the computer. Couldn't a kid just come along and use their parents' Google account?
Absolutely. And that is exactly what people do in practice. We have shared devices in the home, or you see people out in restaurants and they hand their iPad over to their young child. This is very common in how people search for information. And of course, the systems make it quite seamless to be able to even transfer content. I'm looking on my laptop now and then I grab something on the phone, right? It's a very integrated way of looking for information. And that means that if parents really wanted to protect their kids, they've got to ensure that they're logged out on all those devices. That's really going to interrupt kind of that seamless flow of information in the way we've come to know it.
I mean, do you think this will actually work? Will it genuinely stop under 18s from being exposed to things like porn? Or is this just going to make life harder for adults who, really aren't doing anything wrong if they want to access adult content?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think, they are likely to stop those kind of incidental things from happening. We always hear stories about people, starting out looking at, say, the Wiggles on YouTube, and then suddenly they stumble upon something that is definitely not safe for work. So it might stop those kinds of things from happening. But there are so many ways that people could get around this. If a young child purposefully wanted to seek out this content, they could hop on a VPN. They could definitely look for a logged in device in the home to get around it. They could have someone else log them in to look at some content without knowing what the implications of that login might mean. In terms of measuring whether this is going to be really valuable, we're going to have to do a lot of research to really see what the outcome is going to be. But it will definitely create more headaches for the everyday consumer and how they log in and use search services.
You mentioned VPNs there. So a VPN is something a lot of people have. It's an online service that hides your activity and kind of make it looks like you're browsing from somewhere else, perhaps overseas where these laws aren't in effect. So will Aussies be able to bypass these age verification laws with a VPN?
Absolutely. This is definitely a loophole. And we've seen that in the UK, where they recently did bring in this type of restriction for online porn sites. Immediately, VPN registrations went up by an amazing number, something like 1,800% increase within the first 4 days of that going live.
And if we have to give our ID over to Google, for example, to prove that we're over 18, and then we access porn through their server, I mean, isn't that a big privacy issue? Isn't that kind of a juicy target for hackers? Then we could potentially be exposed for what we look up on those porn sites?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the government's stance is that many of us are already kind of opening the door to these companies. We're already sharing a lot of this content with them. We know that hackers are alive and well and looking to find your credit card details. I think many people are going to be very uncomfortable. Even if we know that there's that level of surveillance, it just still feels a little closer to home when there's this requirement, particularly if you're having to give your ID or something where you're really concerned about that hacking. So I think we'll likely see a lot of people moving away from using their logged in account. They may just decide to do more open browsing. And if they do that using a VPN, it's another layer of kind of security or a way to hide your activity in that way.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. If I've got a Google account and I sign out and then just go to Google and use it as a checked out user, can I still access porn then without having to verify my age? Or will it say, no, you have to sign in before you can access that content?
Right. It will still give you all of those links. What it will do is there you'll notice some blurring of images because that's another requirement. So people who are not logged in, there's still an expectation those services will try to protect a child from stumbling upon an image that might be inappropriate, right? But once the link is there, you can click through to the link. You can go to all the places you would normally go. The only restrictions you'd face then would be ones on the site itself that the company has decided to implement.
And they're not obligated. Like the porn hubs of the world aren't obligated to set up an age verification rule. It's just the bigger ones like Google.
Correct. So this is really the legislation that's been brought in, or the regulation is actually at targeting the search services, not the kind of companies and sites that sit within the service or that the service accesses. So in some ways, it's actually a much more broader control, if you will. And that's partly why I think people get quite nervous about it because, there are many people that don't search for porn online. They're just doing everyday business, doing their thing. They want to be logged in. Now, those folks are going to have to assure their age. And if they don't do that, or if their age is legitimately under 18, there could be content blocked that they have a legitimate right to see. So a lot will depend also on, how are we defining online pornography? How are the systems going to judge whether something should be blocked or not? We don't actually know how the search services are going to do that.
From the sounds of it, I'll just be keeping my Google account signed out all the time. Not that I'm looking up porn every minute, but it seems like that's the
Yeah.
smart workaround here.
Well, it's certainly going to be the simplest way, at least in the short run. We'll see what happens with this type of rule. But particularly if you're being required to kind of log in and do the age verification step every single time, you'd probably get very tired of that. We don't even know if that will be a one-off or if they will decide to make us do that at every single login.
Final question. What do you think of this policy and what effect do you think it'll have here in Australia?
I think it's actually a bit of a simplistic solution to what's a really complex problem. I definitely believe if we've got content that's for 18 and overs, there should be some controls. But I think if it's more targeted and dealt with at the site by site level, that's likely a better solution. Trying to do this, one size fits all across an entire search practice is actually really, really difficult. And my concern is that we're going to inadvertently block really relevant information, perhaps health information, for example. If a young child was wanting information, like teenager looking up things about breast cancer, the word breast could inadvertently, push them away from content that's actually extremely valuable. So I think we're going to have to see how this plays out. I think many consumers don't realize that this is coming. And so when December, January comes around and people start getting a lot of these requests, I think Australians will likely do as the Brits have done and start hopping on VPNs.
Lisa Given from RMIT, thank you so much for telling us about this big change, and we'll see how it goes in Australia when it comes into effect in December.
Indeed. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Follow or subscribe to From the Newsroom wherever you get your podcasts.